Hello everyone, Posey here. I'm here on my Hangouts channel, and I know this is a bit of an irregular video since I don't usually make content like this, but let me tell you something about myself. I'm a pretty decent casual fan of the anime Demon Slayer. I think it's cool, I think the fights are pretty epic, I think that the characters on at least the surface level are pretty fun, some of them have interesting explorations, some of them I quite think are compelling. Some aspects of the series I think it pulls off extremely well. However, I do know that it has quite a few flaws. I've heard many of them being discussed before by many different people, and I completely respect everyone's viewpoint and everyone's, prerogative to disagree with me. Which is why when I saw this video by one Captain Mack on my recommended, I decided I was going to check it out at one point. I hadn't heard of Captain Mack before, but it seems that he mostly does content related to manga and anime, and I know 3 of those, one of which is the one he's criticizing, so, why not just watch his video, kind of respond to it as it goes along, and why not, I just add some of my thoughts to that. Now, Demon Slayer content has a lot of misinformation, a lot of criticisms I've seen are just not valid, a lot of them are very surface level, so I was a little concerned going into this that I would need to, have a proper debunk video, like a whole hours-long thing, just debunking every claim made. However, although I do disagree with a good number of things that Captain Mack says in his video, although I do find many of his points iffy, although I do offer alternative, positions, I personally think that this video was not made in bad faith, and I think a lot of the points it raises are also very valid, and I would argue it's actually a pretty good video overall. In production value, it is incredible. I really like it. It's got hilarious editing, some really nice, well-integrated gags. I think Captain Mack is an extremely talented person, an extremely talented YouTuber, and I really respect him in many ways. So I just wanted to put together this video showing my reaction to his video and, me offering my thoughts because I like to ramble about this stuff. So I did get his permission before in order to post this, so with that being said, let's get right into it.
I feel like a crazy person sometimes,
I really like the way this is presented.
There are so many incredible, underappreciated series
very
out
good
there.
work put into
Yet
this.
all anyone wants to talk about is whether or not Tanjiro wants to marry his sister.
Oh, I hate these people too. I'm a Demon Slayer fan, but I despise that part of the fandom. I despise it so much.
Demon Slayer is a masterpiece.
It's terrible.
The glory of Shonen's newest masterpiece.
It's a bit
Demon Slayer just set a new standard.
Yeah, to be fair, I think that video was talking about animation-wise, which I don't think it's possible to deny. Entertainment District Arc's animation was insane.
Has it?
I'll go on.
Has it really? What has Demon Slayer done to earn such praise? Because from my perspective, all I see is a derivative, uninspired, and incompetent manga that manages to fail at the most basic standards of writing.
Yeah, that's a fair perspective to have. I understand.
I know right away that some people think I'm just trying to be a contrarian, or that I'm dunking on Demon Slayer because it's easy to hate popular things. But that isn't the case. I don't go into any new series wanting to dislike it. I don't want to waste my time on something that I won't enjoy.
Yeah, this whole video is definitely constructive. I disagree with some of the things he says, but I absolutely, understand where it's coming from. I respect it.
After reading Demon Slayer, I just felt genuinely confused about what exactly people enjoy about this series. And then I saw the anime.
Yeah, I think there is, a huge portion of people who just like the animation, and that's the only reason they watch. For me, it's a combination of, I think, the animation and some of the nice character interactions, which I enjoy. And, some of the character writing I actually like, but I'll get into that maybe later.
There it is.
I also like the copyright protection.
Pretty animation go burr.
Yep,
look,
pretty much.
I like good animation as much as the next guy. Probably more, actually. I could make a whole video about why I love animators and think they're insane. Yeah. But good animation is only worth so much if the story that it's attached to isn't of the same quality.
Yep.
Incredible fights don't hit as hard if there's no narrative weight behind them.
I definitely agree with that.
Well-directed character moments don't make you feel anything if the build-up to that point is non-existent. So
also
yes,
true.
I
In a
need you to
vacuum,
forget
I
the
should
flashy
say.
animation for a moment, because today we're talking about the writing behind Demon Slayer and the many ways that it simply doesn't work. And
All
yes, there will be Demon Slayer spoilers ahead.
I don't know how there wouldn't be.
Disclaimer! Throughout this video, I mistakenly referred to the author of Demon Slayer by masculine pronouns, only to find out during editing that they prefer gender-neutral pronouns. I am very sorry about that. That was my mistake. I will be more careful in the future.
Yeah, this
Demon
is a
Slayer is a
respectable thing to
shonen
include.
manga
Thank
created
you.
by Koyoharu Gotouge, which was first serialized in Weekly Shonen Jump. To say that Demon Slayer was Gotouge's first big success would be an understatement. In
That's
fact,
pretty much
it's been
true.
so successful
Yeah,
that
they started off
Gotouge was
with
included in the
one-shots.
Times 100 most influential people list, the first mangaka to receive such an honor. You know who didn't receive that award? The late Kentaro Miura, the brilliant author of Berserk, which has been a massive inspiration for other manga creators and artists the world over. Eiichiro Oda, the author of One Piece, a manga that has eclipsed Batman in comic sales.
That's wild.
Akira Toriyama. I don't even like Dragon Ball, and I think that's bullshit.
Rest in peace.
Demon
And yeah,
Slayer
that is
set
kind
some-
of bullshit. Like, I like Demon Slayer, but I do think all of those mangaka deserve their own awards.
sometime in Japan's Taisho era and follows the story of Tanjiro Kamado. Tanjiro is just a normal kid from a small remote village. Very normal. Not special at all. He cares deeply for his large family, but Chapter 1 plot twist.
I
They're
love how
all
they
dead.
just keeps including
Killed overnight while
copyright
Tanjiro was away.
protection boys.
No killer in sight. Tanjiro acts fast, realizing that his sister Nezuko may still be alive. He rushes to get her to a doctor.
Oh god.
But Chapter 1
This
plot
is
twist.
terrible. Not the video, just
She's a
the
demon.
incest jokes.
In the world of Demon Slayer, demons are
Absolutely
monsters
hate
with
that part of the
superhuman
fandom.
strength and abilities that feed on humans in order to grow stronger. Demons can regenerate almost any damage they take, but they die in the sunlight, so they can only hunt at night. They're a lot like Reddit mods in our world. The only way for Nezuko to have become a demon would be if Tanjiro's family was attacked by a demon.
Which is what happened.
But that's not important right now. What matters is that Nezuko is a demon. Meaning, just
Yep.
like a woman from Alabama, she wants a piece of her brother.
Oh my god.
Tanjiro fends her off and tries to plead with her until a man with a sword tries to kill Nezuko in order to protect Tanjiro. This man is a demon slayer. What's that, you might
Love
be
this
asking?
guy.
Oh god, I hope you aren't asking. Demon slayers slay demons.
Insane. Massive
Funny Swordman
revelation.
is here to kill Nezuko, but not before having a lengthy conversation with Tanjiro about how he's a beta male that can't protect his sister. This leads to Tanjiro attacking the man and impressing him with his natural affinity for combat before ultimately getting knocked out. Nezuko escapes the man's grasp, but Chapter 1 plot twist, she protects Tanjiro instead of trying to attack him. Stunned by this turn of events, the man knocks Nezuko out instead of killing her. He realized that Nezuko and Tanjiro are built different, given that Nezuko shouldn't be able to resist her urge to eat humans. When they wake up, he directs Tanjiro to go meet an old man living in the mountains. This is Orokodaki. He's a man that trains people to become demon slayers. Tanjiro is going to become a demon slayer in order to search for a way to make Nezuko human again. So, it is okay to kill demons, but only the demons that aren't his sister. There's zero chance that any other demon is morally ambiguous. No, this will not be a plot point.
Okay, so this is the first point of his that I do disagree with, because that's ignoring Tamayo, that's ignoring Yushiro, that's ignoring the fact that there is moral ambiguity assigned to multiple demons throughout the story. Gyutaro, Daki, Akaza, Kokushibo are just some examples. You can argue about how effective that is, and in fact he does later in the video, but it is just wrong to claim that it's not attempted at all, and I think this is like a minor issue I have with his video.
You'll remember that demons have regenerative abilities, so they can't be killed by normal means. The only way to kill a demon is to expose them to sunlight, or to cut off their head with a special kind of sword. What makes this sword special, and why can it kill demons? Well, these swords are made from metal mined out of a volcano, which has the power of the sun contained in the earth, and I'm just fucking with you, there's no reason. It's never gonna—
Second problem with the video, there is a reason. In fact, it's very similar to the one he came up with for a gag. He just forgot, which is strange considering he made a big of how much research he did or something like that. Even in this pinned comment, he basically says, I know I got the sword thing wrong, my bad, I forgot, which is strange considering he did make it clear he did research, but whatever, it's not a huge deal. It's a
Gonna be explained, so
really
just don't
minor
question
point in
it.
the grand scheme of things.
Urokodaki teaches Tanjiro the basics of swordsmanship, and then tells him he has to cut a big rock if he wants a chance to take the test to become a demon slayer. Tanjiro struggles with how to approach this issue until he meets Urokodaki's other students, Sabito and Makomo. For the next 6 months, they train Tanjiro in Urokodaki's stead. They teach Tanjiro about total concentration breathing, the main weapon a demon slayer utilizes. By breathing a certain way, demon slayers can give their blood and muscles extra air, allowing them to move faster and stronger. This breathing gives them strength analogous to the superhuman strength of a demon, but is very taxing on the body, so it takes Tanjiro a while to learn it. About 6 months, in fact. After 6 months of training, Tanjiro and Sabito duel, and Tanjiro wins, only to find that he's managed to split the rock in half, meaning he's now ready to become a demon slayer.
I like how he enunciates 6
Before
months.
setting out, Tanjiro asks Urokodaki to thank
'Cause I've already
Sabito and
watched this
Makomo
video,
for their
but
help.
now I'm recording my reaction.
Urokodaki then questions how Tanjiro can know the names of his dead students. That's right, they were dead the entire time, killed in a plot relevancy accident 30 years ago.
This is canon, there was actually a
You may have
transport truck
noticed
there.
me reiterating that 6-month timeline kind of a lot. That's because I
Yeah,
have a
I
real
did.
fucking problem with this plot point. Tanjiro was living in Urokodaki's house this entire time. Do you really expect me to believe that over the course of 6 fucking months, it never came up in conversation that Tanjiro was training with Urokodaki's deceased students?
Yeah, that's a fair point.
It's
I
absurdly
agree with that.
convenient to say the least.
Yep.
Not to mention that their involvement in the story not only establishes that ghosts are real, but also that they can have a tangible effect on the world of the living. Sabito was even able to injure Tanjiro. I don't have a problem with the whole ghost thing because that's pretty consistent, but you will never again see one actually do anything besides talking to people that were important to them when they were alive.
Yeah, the ghost
With
thing
that
is...
being said though, this is
very
hardly the
underutilized.
biggest problem with Demon Slayer. It's just one of many. Let's talk about that total concentration breathing from before, since it's the primary power system in Demon Slayer. You would think from the description that there is only one special way of breathing to strengthen a Demon Slayer, but no. There are in fact many different ways to breathe. They're breathing, everybody. I just want to make that clear. Sabito specifically taught Tanjiro one form of breathing, water breathing. This means that when he attacks, it appears as though water
true.
is rushing out of his sword. But don't be fooled. As far as I can tell, this is just visual flair for us as the audience to enjoy. In reality, he's just swinging his sword around. There's no actual water.
I always thought that was stupid. Like, I feel like Gotouge needed more confidence with the absurdity of their power system. Like, take something like JoJo, for instance. JoJo just is so unapologetic about how batshit crazy it gets sometimes, which is part of the reason why I find that show so appealing. I feel like, they, with Demon Slayer, Gotouge literally could have just said, yeah, the effects are real, and that would have made more sense, which is shocking to say, but it probably would have.
Not that I would blame you for thinking otherwise, given that it is never explained or even alluded to. Even through conducting research for this video, I wasn't able to find a solid consensus on whether or not that's true.
So he said that he conducted research, which makes me wonder how he forgot details like the sword, but it's not a huge deal. It just seems like his research was very selective, wherein I would have liked to have, fact-checked every claim I was making against the series before posting that video, but again, it's a minor issue. Don't really care too much. I just feel like it's worth bringing up.
It's just my own interpretation at this point. Why give clear indicators of plot information when you can just not? Answering important questions is just so much work.
It's a pretty bad
There are
aspect
other
of
breathing
Demon
styles
Slayer.
such as flame breathing and thunder breathing, which give off the appearance of their title. My main problem with breathing comes from a lack of differentiation. Now, I know at first that may not make any sense, given that each style is very visually distinct. But what I'm talking about is functionality.
Yeah, but the effects aren't real.
Functionally
That's the big
speaking,
problem.
most of the breathing types are exactly the same. When you create different forms of the same ability, there needs to be strengths and weaknesses to each of them. Now, on the surface, this does exist. Thunder breathing is much faster than the other forms in a technical sense. But in reality, each style of breathing has the same or similar abilities to every other form, meaning they're all functionally the same. There's never a moment in this series where Tanjiro is at a disadvantage because he's a water breather. There's never a moment where two characters trade opponents in order to get a better matchup. It's completely meaningless flash with no substance. If you think I'm wrong, then tell me the difference between the following attacks. Sound breathing, 4th form, water breathing, 4th form turbulent, and beast breathing, 5th fang. The answer is that there is no difference.
I would argue that there are some instances where you can see the differences between breathing styles play out, but it's hard to reference specific ones since it is generally across the series in both the manga and the anime. So I'm gonna say that Captain Mack is generally correct here. I mean, there's probably some examples that would disprove him, but I think as a general statement, this is fine.
Each representative of multiple slashes in multiple directions, meaning that there is no real difference between them besides how they're presented visually. This is a common theme across every form. They all share attacks. And by the way, can we talk about the blatant misogyny in this power system? There are so many different forms of
Yes, we can, and I actually appreciate that a lot. I like it when people call out misogyny in popular anime, because I know it is a pretty big problem in the genre. Shonen is certainly no exception, and Demon Slayer is no exception either.
There's stone breathing, wind breathing, mist breathing. But what do the female characters use? Insect breathing, flower breathing, love breathing.
Yeah, this is...
There is not a single living female Demon Slayer that does not use a feminine breathing style.
Okay, so that's technically wrong. There is Aoi. She's a water breather. But I don't think Aoi really disproves his point, considering she barely fighting in the story. She's never actually seen fighting. She's mostly a healer. And, really she's kind of just Inosuke's love interest at the end of the story, which doesn't actually help the defense against misogyny. If anything, that actually adds to his argument. So, he's not wrong. He could have rephrased a little bit, but his point still mostly holds true.
So you want to be a Demon Slayer, hey kid? Well, you're gonna need to choose a breathing style. Although, since I see you've got a pair of fatty tissue sacks, these are your only actual options. But since it is Women's History Month, for limited time only, you can try having a job breathing.
And all of this comes before we question how exactly breathing a certain way enables different abilities. It doesn't make any sense, and
oh yeah, by the way, something I didn't mention before, Mitsuri was actually originally training for flame breathing, but love breathing became more personality. At least I believe so. I think it's in a fan book though, so it's totally fine for Captain Mack to not acknowledge this or not know this, because obviously the manga and the anime should not rely on fan books to do the writing for them, especially since many of them aren't even written by Gotouge.
And there's never an explanation for what the actual difference between each of them is. There are exceptions, such as Shinobu Kocho's insect breathing, which utilizes poison instead of actual blade attacks to take down enemies.
Yeah, this is one of the coolest ones, in my opinion.
Because she's too weak to decapitate demons. The girl is too weak to cut off a demon's head.
Okay, so, I understand where this is coming from. I don't think it's entirely invalid, but a couple things to consider. This is specific to Shinobu, and does not apply to any other female character. It doesn't apply to Kanao, it doesn't apply to Mitsuri, certainly doesn't apply to Mitsuri. In fact, there's a huge defining characteristic of Mitsuri, is that she's extremely strong, and she has a lot of muscle density. So if anything, it's actually the opposite. This is more of a Shinobu-specific thing, and also, in fact, there's another character, Obanai, who himself is very weak, and he's not a girl, so I don't know. This one is a bit iffy. This point, I don't quite agree on. I understand where it's coming from, but yeah. I mean, yeah, it's not perfect in my opinion.
Would it be so hard to make each style this distinct? Am I asking too much?
Yeah, no, they should have made things more distinct in the anime, or, Gotouge should have written it that way in the manga.
Actually, I don't think I'm asking enough. Let's talk about Shinobu's poison for a second. Shinobu's poison uses wisteria flower, a type of plant that demons are weak to. Even if the demons don't die from this poison, it does render them weak and slows their ability to regenerate. So why the fuck doesn't every Demon Slayer coat their blade with this shit? That sounds like a pretty useful debuff to carry around.
Be a huge
really
debuff.
good way to level the playing field. It's not even established that wisteria flowers are particularly rare. There shouldn't be any reason the other Demon Slayers can't use it.
Yeah, so, I mean, I could try to defend this, but a lot of it would be doing writing on behalf of Gotouge, which I'm trying to avoid doing. Fortunately, you know, art tends to be kind of collaborative sometimes between the author and the audience. If the audience feels attached to the work of art, they're going to come up with defenses for it, and they're going to kind of do some of the writing for the author to cover areas they forgot about. And I'm going to try to avoid that here. There are definitely explanations that could be made, but if they're not stated explicitly in the story, then I don't think they matter.
When you write a power system into a series like this, the audience needs to understand the basic rules behind it so they can determine the capabilities and limitations of each character.
Yep.
Gotouge doesn't want you to understand breathing because then he would actually have to put some thought into writing this crap. Speaking of things that don't have a lot of thought put into them, let's talk about Tanjiro. I don't like Tanjiro, and it's for the exact same reason that I think a lot of other people do like him. Tanjiro is a very good boy. That's pretty much his entire character. I would describe Tanjiro as a character that is designed to be liked.
Let's see what he says.
Now, obviously most characters are designed for the audience to like them, but the problem with Tanjiro is that he's designed to be liked first, and designed as an actual character second. Something I've talked about across every manga video I've ever made is that writing a good character means writing them to be human. And to be human is to have flaws.
That is definitely true.
You want your character to have flaws because you want the audience to be able to relate to them.
Yep.
You want them to look and say, hey, this character struggles with anxiety. That's something I can relate to. Now I can empathize with their struggles. Tanjiro doesn't have flaws. He's a perfect ray of sunshine that does no wrong. His personality does not conflict with the other characters once they get to know him. They all just get along.
That's not true. Genya is a character who doesn't get along with Tanjiro. Tsunemi is a character who doesn't get along with Tanjiro. Obanai doesn't particularly like him. That's just examples. I feel like he's oversimplifying for this point. I don't agree.
And when they all get along, there is no room for character conflict, which is an incredibly effective writing tool that can both make a story more interesting and push it forward.
He's literally showing clips of Genya on the screen, a character who he does have conflict with, so I do not understand where this is coming from. But whatever.
Genuinely, trying to list Tanjiro's weaknesses as a person is like Michael Scott listing his weaknesses for David Wallace.
What do you think are your greatest strengths as a manager? Why don't I tell you what my greatest weaknesses are? I work too hard, I care too much, and sometimes I can be too invested in my job. Okay.
Now with that being said, there is room for Tanjiro to have a weakness that still makes him look good.
So one thing I guess I didn't mention before, I personally interpret Tanjiro as having a lot of anxiety, and the imposter syndrome about, his role in the Demon Slayer Corps. At some points, I can't really back that up because this is pretty impromptu, but I definitely think it's there. Is it pronounced enough? Well, that's a debatable topic. Clearly, Mack does not think so. I personally like him as a character. I feel like he has some dimensionality to him, but that's just me. Again, we're gonna interpret these characters differently, so there's nothing wrong with him having this take.
When Urokodaki first meets Tanjiro, his first thought is that Tanjiro is too kind for his own good, which makes him hesitate to kill his enemies. He hesitates so much that the sun comes up and kills the demon before Tanjiro can. In this story, caring too much could be a really big weakness for Tanjiro because it would prevent him from killing dangerous enemies quickly.
Been like a huge
Yet
weakness.
after training with Urokodaki, that side of his character disappears entirely.
Yeah,
don't get me wrong,
true.
he's still extremely kind, but it doesn't hold him back anymore. You could call this character development, but it isn't.
Yeah, so I guess the main differentiation is, I believe he has anxiety. I believe he has some level of imposter syndrome. Sometimes he is too kind for his own good, but that doesn't really hold him back in any tangible way, which is probably what Mack is getting at when he says he doesn't have real flaws, which I totally understand.
It's resolved too fast. It doesn't affect the plot at any point. Tanjiro doesn't actually go through the steps of developing, it just kinda happens. It's like if an Olympic runner hopped in a golf cart, drove around the track, and then crossed the finish line. Just because they crossed the finish line doesn't mean they ran the race, and they definitely don't deserve an award for it. There is one other example of a potential flaw for Tanjiro that gets negated entirely. Throughout the story, during his tough battles, Tanjiro repeatedly breaks his sword. Now, I actually really liked this at first because the fragility of katana-style swords was brought up and explained very early in the series. So I saw Tanjiro breaking his sword over and over as a major flaw in his ability to fight that he needs to overcome. But no. After the third time that happens, Tanjiro goes to the swordsmith village and they explain that it's not his fault. His blacksmith is the one to blame for making swords that break so easily. He'll never change.
That doesn't seem like a word of God statement as much as it seems like characterization for the swordsmiths. The swordsmith chief very much likes to blame his underlings for things. He's kind of an asshole, to be honest, so I wouldn't take that as an objective statement about who's at fault for the swords breaking. And you can't argue that, at the very least, when Tanjiro threw one of the swords at Akaza, you cannot argue that that was not his fault, that that was not a flaw with his character. Now, it's not a very good flaw because it's not very developed, but I do think you're taking that line too literally, Mac, in my opinion, and you are glossing over a couple small details, but that's all.
He'll never change. Ever since he was 15, always the same. Couldn't stop breaking his swords. But not our Tanjiro. Couldn't be precious Tanjiro. And he gets to be a demon slayer? What a sick joke. So for this reason, I find Tanjiro to be an incredibly boring character.
That's
fair. He has no character growth or development, and he really doesn't struggle throughout the story beyond struggling in a fight. Mind you, I don't think every character needs to be written as a piece of shit to be engaging. You can write lovable characters that are still flawed. But writing a character with the intention of making them universally likable rather ironically makes them the least likable character of all, because they don't inspire any kind of emotion.
Well, that's not true, because Zenitsu
What's
exists.
engaging about a character that doesn't have to struggle or change? They're just boring. Tanjiro is boring.
This is a fair perspective.
And not
to
only
have.
is Tanjiro
really
boring,
agree,
so is how he's utilized in
this
this story. I'm gonna say something that some people might have a problem with, but I need you to hear me out before you get all up in arms. Tanjiro is a chosen one.
Okay.
Now you might immediately disagree with me because no, Tanjiro is never referred to as the chosen one in this story, nor is there a prophecy foretelling his exploits, which is how a lot of chosen one stories play out. But in terms of his exploits and how he affects the world, Tanjiro is absolutely the chosen one. So to set the stage for this explanation, we need to understand some of the lore behind Demon Slayer. All of the demons in Demon Slayer were created using the blood of a single demon. That demon is Muzan Kibutsuji, and he's creating other demons in order to try to find a way to negate his weakness to sunlight. The strongest demons under Muzan's control are known as the 12 Kizuki, and they're ranked from strongest to weakest, with the weakest 6 being known as the lower rank Kizuki, and the strongest 6 the upper rank Kizuki. This is really important for us to know because at the time Demon Slayer takes place, it has been more than 100 years since an upper rank Kizuki was killed. Within the Demon Slayer core, there is also a ranking system based on strength. There are 10 different ranks a Demon Slayer can achieve, and this is something you do not need to remember at all. It has literally zero impact on the plot and very, very rarely gets brought up. The only reason I'm even bringing it up is to make fun of how lazy and pointless it is.
See, not every detail in a plot needs to be elaborated on like that much. I feel like he's maybe a bit too hung up on this detail. I mean, it's not a huge deal, but yeah, again, just kind of like a minor point of contention here.
What you do need to know is that there is one additional rank not included on this list, and that is the Hashira. The Hashira are the strongest Demon Slayers in the Demon Slayer core. During this period, there are 9 Hashira. So, over the past 100+ years, not a single Hashira has managed to kill an upper rank demon. That's important, because it shows that Muzan's demons and the Demon Slayer core are not equal in strength.
Okay, that's not the only reason. It's also that the upper rank demons are extremely hard to find, and they're not usually antagonizing people. It the case that they go after the blue spider lily, following Muzan's orders to try and make him immortal, basically. Like, that's his main goal. And usually, cross paths with the demon slayers. They're not easy to find. The Hashira don't really come across them very much. So that's another reason why the Hashira don't really engage, and another reason why they don't tend to kill Upper Moons.
Until time.
That's why, for 100 years, no Upper Moon has been killed, besides the obvious strength gap, which is a factor.
Tanjiro joins. That's an upper rank demon.
That is an upper rank demon, but that is Tengen Uzui, who just so happens to be a Hashira. And he also had Zenitsu and Inosuke and even Nezuko involved in that fight as well. And they all played pretty critical roles in enabling the slaying of Gyutaro and Daki. Like, if you took a single one of those characters out of the fight, I legitimately do not believe it would have been winnable. Like, Entertainment District went out of its way to display that all of them were core players in that fight, and that it could not have been won without them. So I do not think it is fair to claim that Tanjiro is the sole reason why this happened, why this result came about. I think they were all, valuable in the fight, and it required their unique abilities, their team up, in order to actually guarantee a victory.
And that's his head being removed, thereby killing him.
Yep.
So that's pretty huge, huh? First upper rank demon to go down in over a century.
And it took a Hashira, and Tanjiro, and Zenitsu, and Inosuke, and Nezuko to take down that upper rank. Remember that.
How did we get there?
Over
the course of his adventures,
I should have let him finish his sentence.
Tanjiro made some friends. He met Zenitsu, a thunder-breathing user who is the worst character in this series. We'll talk about that later. And Inosuke, who is funny. I like Inosuke.
Yep,
Funny
I like Inosuke too. He's
giggle.
One of my favorites.
Tanjiro is joined by Zenitsu, Inosuke, and the Hashira Uzui in battling the weakest upper rank demon, which is actually two demons who need to have their heads cut off at the same time to kill them.
Yep.
At this time, Tanjiro and his friends
which would not have been possible without all of them working together. I'm just going to remind him.
Kanoe, meaning they're the 4th out of the 10 ranks. This is literally the only time in the story that Tanjiro's current rank is ever brought up. So don't get confused in thinking this matters, but
It doesn't really need to. Again, it is just a cosmetic thing.
I'm glad we have it so I can establish where we're at. Tanjiro and his friends are still in the bottom half of the ranks. You've got 3 4 out of 10 slayers, 1 demon, and 1 Hashira fighting an upper rank demon level pair. Now, it could be argued that Tanjiro is actually stronger than his current rank would suggest, and I would argue that he is.
Yes, he is.
The reason for that is because before this battle, Tanjiro awakened to a new power.
Yes.
This is the Hinokami Kagura, later revealed to be sun breathing.
Yep.
Sun breathing is the first and strongest form of breathing, which was passed down in Tanjiro's family line in the form of a ceremonial dance. Now, I have a question about sun breathing. Why is it the strongest? Or more specifically, why is Tanjiro stronger for being able to use it? It's established that sun breathing is the first form of total concentration breathing, and that every other form of breathing is an offshoot of sun breathing
that
was developed for demon slayers that found sun breathing too difficult to utilize. Now, this could be a decent explanation for why it's so powerful, but it really isn't. One reason you could give is that sun breathing is the strongest because it negates the weaknesses inherent in every other lesser form. But we've already established that each type of breathing is functionally the same, with none of them having any major drawbacks.
Yeah,
so
we don't really get that displayed.
Is the explanation that sun breathing is strong because it's hard to do, which is a pretty terrible explanation.
Yeah, it's not great.
You know what else is hard to do? Getting through Demon Slayer without clawing my eyes out. But am I a stronger person for being able to do it? Apparently not. This also seriously calls into question the actual strength of the Hashira, because it stands to reason that a novice or even intermediate level sun breathing user would be weaker than a master sounding user. Yet which one of these fuckheads lost an arm in this fight?
Okay, so Tengen was up against Gyutaro for the majority of that fight. Tanjiro was facing off against Gyutaro very briefly. I would say Tengen actually hard carried the Gyutaro side of that fight. In fact, there was a point where he was soloing Gyutaro, and Tanjiro was fighting with Zenitsu and Inosuke against Daki. So I don't actually know where this point is coming from. He's trying to argue that the show makes it seem like Tanjiro is stronger than Tengen, but that is just not the case. Because Tengen takes the brunt of this fight, and, to show for it, he loses an arm, and he loses an eye, and he almost dies, in fact.
I don't think Tanjiro is stronger than Uzui at this time, for the record. But
Yeah,
this will
he's
feed
not.
into a point I'm going to make later. So, we've got Tanjiro awakening to a long-lost...
Yeah, so he says he doesn't think that, but he's clearly trying to imply that the show is presenting it that way, by implying that Tanjiro is the reason why the upper rank demon died. Even though I think if you took anyone out of that fight, the upper rank demon would have won.
powerful form of breathing that no one else is capable of using. That's chosen one indicator number 1.
No, not no one else. That is not true. No one else, in the current story, I suppose. So it's not like a totally unfair point. But he did come from a long line of people who passed on the ability, and of course, Irichi also had it.
Shockingly, sun breathing is not the only magical power buff that Tanjiro suddenly awakens to.
Sun breathing is not a magical power. I mean, I guess it is still a buff. I'm sure it's a figure of speech.
When he needs it. This is the mark.
Oh, hi, Mark.
The mark is explained pretty vaguely, but the basic idea is that manifesting the mark just makes you stronger.
Yes.
It's Demon Slayer's version of Super Saiyan, and just like Super Saiyan, it stops being special pretty quickly. See, the interesting thing about the mark is that it can only be manifested if the user
requirements
has
for
been
it in
in
terms of body temperature are also very strange.
contact with
I
someone
won't get into
else
that.
who has already manifested the mark. So that begs the question, how did Tanjiro manifest it? Well, Tanjiro was born on the first full moon during a summer equinox in the 20th century, making him, I'm just fucking with you. There's no reason.
No, that's not true. There is actually a reason. Again, his family came from a long line that originated from Sumiyoshi, who was visited by Yorichi, and Sumiyoshi, I believe, picked up the mark from Yorichi, and it was passed down, or at least the capacity for a mark, I should say, was passed down through Tanjiro's family until it reached him. His father, Tanjiro, also has the mark. It doesn't appear in the same form, but the mark is certainly there. It's not like the best explanation. It's not super well elaborated on in the story, but it does exist.
It's established that the first mark user was born with it already on his face.
This is true.
This is not the case for Tanjiro, as it's established that the scar on his face came from an injury.
Yeah, except the potentiality for the mark still exists, even if the mark doesn't already exist. So this is a non-point.
No explanation for why Tanjiro gets the mark is ever offered.
There is an explanation.
He's just special that way, I guess.
No, that is
And
not
as
true.
just explained,
It's poorly explained, but there is an explanation.
after Tanjiro manifests the mark, so do some of the other Demon Slayers, allowing the Demon Slayer core to grow
Yeah.
in strength thanks to Tanjiro. So now we have Tanjiro awakening another long-lost, powerful ability inexplicably, which allows
Not inexplicably.
other people to be stronger just by the very nature of Tanjiro's existence.
No, that is not why. But okay.
Chosen one indicator number 2.
Okay, let me explain this again. It is not because Tanjiro was there. Anyone who had the capacity for the mark before that could have shown up. And anyone, but of course it was Tanjiro's family who carried the mark.
Finally, we've got the
I don't
fact that
really
Tanjiro
agree,
defeated
but
an
I
upper rank
understand.
demon at all. I'm sorry, but this victory just does not make sense.
Tanjiro did not defeat Gyutaro and Daki on his own. I've gone over this already.
We've got 3 weaker than Hashira Demon Slayers, 1 Hashira, and 1 demon that doesn't contribute to the fight much.
That is not true. But okay. I mean, she distracts Daki long enough for Tengen to get there, and Tengen being there is basically crucial. And if she didn't distract Daki long enough, I mean, Tanjiro very well could have died. And because you're saying that Tanjiro is, a super special boy who's super important, that would actually cause the fight to end. Like, that would ruin everything. So don't go around saying Nezuko was not important to this fight. Like, this is the point I will contend with you on any day of the week. You are just wrong. Like, I'm sorry.
It makes even less sense when you consider that the demons wield a poison that every character is for some reason immune to.
That's not true. No, none of them are immune. No, Tengen stops the flow of the poison by clenching his muscles, which is explained to be a shinobi tactic. An actual thing that they explain in the story that he appears to have just glossed over, which I have a problem with. Not many things are well explained in Demon Slayer, but this is. Now, as for Inosuke, Inosuke's is more bullshit. His explanation is that he grew up on the mountains, so he's more resistant to poison. He doesn't survive it, though. He doesn't resist the poison. Well, I mean, he does resist it a little bit, but he's not immune. In fact, the poison almost kills both of them. There is a critique to be made here about how Nezuko kind of like ass-pulls this healing ability to bring them back before they die. He very much could have made that point. Unfortunately, he did not. He chose to focus on something that's just wrong. Because again, the poison, no one's immune to that. They're just resistant for one reason or another, and they get ass-pulled back to life, basically, which is the real problem.
The poison is supposed to at least weaken them, but they still
It does.
manage to win.
Barely. Like, that fight, they were scrapping by at the end. Like, they were right on the verge of death at that point. Like, they were, like, exerting themselves to their limit.
If not one upper ranked demon has been killed in over 100 years, then the fact that they managed to do it here just makes me think that the Demon Slayer Corps wasn't trying very hard.
Again, they're extremely hard to find.
Even knowing that Tanjiro had to awaken 2 power buffs to pull it off. What this victory says to me is that over the past century,
He keeps giving Tanjiro sole credit for that fight, as if every member wasn't important. Like, this is what's bothering me the most. I don't know if he really engaged with that.
one person in the Demon Slayer Corps thought teamwork would be a good idea. It took 3 Kanoe and 1 Hashira to take down an upper ranked demon. There are 9 Hashira! Are you really telling me that none of them ever thought to work together to take down an upper rank?
We don't know that. You're making that assumption.
There is a possible defense here. It's stated at some point,
Again, it's really hard to find the upper ranks. We have no reason to think that they haven't tried that again. Now, this is me, I guess this is me trying the story for the writer, but just as much as I can't necessarily assume it's happened, you can't really assume it hasn't happened either.
remember when, that the Hashira are each busy because they cover a territory that they protect
There's
from
also
demons.
that.
So maybe an explanation is that they simply can't get the Hashira together at the same time to fight an upper rank.
Probably not for extended periods of time, and again, it's really hard to find the upper ranks. I'm gonna keep stressing this point.
But this is bullshit for a number of reasons.
Okay.
Number one, they all gather in one spot twice a year to meet with the leader of the Demon Slayer Corps.
Which is a super important, ceremonial thing, and they also know where that place is.
Number two, if that is the explanation,
And they don't know, sorry, I'm cutting him off here, but again, they don't know where to find the upper rank demons without extensive research. They know where to find the master. This is a very different situation.
then it's indicative of very poor strategic thinking on the leader of the Demon Slayers that they can't organize other Demon Slayers to cover the Hashira's territory while they hunt the upper ranks.
We also don't necessarily have evidence to assume that's never happened before, but I'm gonna leave it because I do feel like I am writing for the writer.
And number three, if the Hashira can't get together, then why not make it a requirement that each Hashira has 4 or 5 high-ranking Demon Slayers working with them at any given time in case they encounter an
That
upper
would be
rank.
a good idea. Yep. Again, we don't really have evidence that's never happened before, but we don't see it in the show, so it's fair to assume.
The problem here is an issue of convincing the audience. The idea that it has been 100 years since an upper rank was killed is a huge bar to clear. It suggests that even several Hashira would not be enough to take one down.
Not necessarily. It suggests that Hashira haven't been able to take them down for any possible reason, which may include the fact that they're really hard to find, which I'm going to keep stressing.
So that means Gotouge needs to put in the work to show that Tanjiro and his friends are strong enough to change that. And what we have now is just not very convincing.
I totally understand.
Remember
why.
the lower rank Kizuki? The 6
Even though I
weakest
have
out
some
of
disagreements, I understand where he's coming from here.
the 12 strongest demons, Tanjiro fought only 2 of these and seriously struggled with them before taking on the upper ranks.
And Enmu, one of the ones he did fight, was the strongest one of the lower ranks, and he received a buff directly from Muzan.
After that, Gotouge just rose.
Also, he mostly fought that fight on his own, with some help from Inosuke. Well, actually, from a lot of help from Inosuke, to be but he didn't have Zenitsu for the fight, he didn't have Rengoku for the fight, he didn't have Nezuko, so it's a significant difference from Daki. It's also a significant difference from just Daki and Gyutaro in general. So I would say that the power levels aren't quite as inconsistent as he's making them out to be.
Wrote them out of the story completely.
Yeah, that was kind of dumb. Even though it did do a good job to show off Muzan as being intimidating, it did close a lot of story potential.
Was a huge mistake.
Yeah,
Tanjiro
huge
should
mistake.
not have defeated an upper rank until it was shown that he could single-handedly take down a lower rank with relative ease.
Well, that's mostly the case for Enmu. Again, Inosuke was helping, but Tanjiro did a lot of work during that fight, and buffed by Muzan. Assumedly he would be able to take on a lower rank than Enmu. By that logic, it would be very strange if the Muzan amp didn't significantly boost Enmu, but whatever.
Because that would be great evidence of his growth.
True.
Instead, they're treated like worthless cannon fodder by Muzan, which just makes it harder to believe that Tanjiro can take down an upper rank since he struggled so much with the lower ranks. But
he doesn't take down an upper rank on his own. He does not do that. He doesn't do that in Entertainment District. He doesn't do that in Swordsmith Village. Infinity Castle, he doesn't take down an upper rank on his own. He doesn't even take down Akaza on his own without significant help from Giyu, and even then, Akaza has to give up. So at no point in the story does Tanjiro ever solo an upper moon, which is what Captain Mack seems to be trying to claim happens, or at least imply happens. I just don't get this part.
The reality is that there is no valid explanation for why not a single upper rank demon has been killed over the past 100 years.
Again, they're really hard to find, but this is a very obvious one.
And this is the final and greatest indicator that Tanjiro is the chosen one. This is what I like to call the center of the world protagonist writing method. The idea behind it is that the entire world is stagnant and unchanging until the protagonist becomes a part of it. At which point the world suddenly starts changing and moving forward.
Yeah.
I have never seen an example of this writing method being used that works.
I'm also not a fan.
It is always bad because it suggests that nothing can happen in a story's world without the involvement of the protagonist.
Yeah, pretty much.
The best stories in writing display a living, breathing world where things happen that affect the protagonist and their story without them having to be directly involved in those events. The worst stories do the opposite.
Yeah, I agree
with that. It is not
too.
impossible to write a character as a chosen one and have it be good. But this is not one of those examples. The character writing in Demon Slayer is atrocious. Hell,
I would say it sometimes is. It really depends from character to character. There are some characters who I personally believe are very strong, like Shinobu, for instance. Giyu as well, but I mean, there are some who I'm not quite satisfied with.
Insulting to other writers to even call it character writing. I should say the caricature writing in Demon Slayer is atrocious. These characters have no
I don't really agree though.
Depth. They are obnoxious, and I can't stand them. This is Zenitsu.
That's fair. I mean, it's his perspective. I don't really agree.
I hate Zenitsu.
I definitely understand where he's coming from. I used to like Zenitsu. He slowly got worse the more I thought of him. So I totally sympathize with Max hate of the guy at this point.
His two characteristics are that he is horny and a coward. His character does not have any depth beyond that. He gets scared and cries.
Yeah, if I tried to defend his character by elaborating on his depth, I would practically be writing for the writer.
And screams constantly, or he tries to sexually assault the female characters. That's it! Now, the cowardly part of Zenitsu's character could be and should be thought of as a personal flaw for him to overcome, given that, as a demon slayer, he is too scared to fight demons. You would think that would hold him back and make him a liability, leading to an internal conflict and a desire to change.
Yep.
But that's not what happens.
Yeah,
you see, instead of him having to overcome his personal flaw and change to be a better person, Zenitsu just falls asleep. And that allows him to fight while asleep.
Yeah.
Are you trying to piss me off? I can accept the whole only able to fight while asleep thing as quirky anime shit, but here's the problem with it. This is not a limitation for Zenitsu. Because functionally, there is zero difference between Zenitsu being awake or asleep, other than that he is less annoying. While asleep, Zenitsu is still capable of rational thought, and we can hear his unconscious inner monologue, which is a total oxymoron. He's even capable of speaking and communicating with other characters and strategizing
this is really
with
dumb.
them. So he's just awake with more steps. It's just quirky for the sake of being quirky. It's a complete waste of character writing.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of that.
There is a way to
either.
write this and have it not suck. It could be that while asleep, he loses the ability to tell the difference between friend and foe, thus making him a threat to the
really
others.
cool, actually.
Or maybe while asleep,
Like,
he
this is a
fights
great idea.
recklessly, because there's very little thought behind his actions, thus making it very dangerous for him.
That is a great idea. Like, I'm now actually upset that this wasn't touched upon by the show.
Both of those scenarios would make this facet of his character a limitation, and therefore something he could overcome.
Also, about his treatment of women, I really wish he grew out of that, because he does not, and in fact, he gets rewarded with it, because Nezuko chooses to be with him anyway. I always felt pissed at the end of the manga for that. Like, even though I generally like this story, and I don't think it's necessarily as terrible as Captain Mack is saying, I really hate that, and I really despise the whole Zenitsu x Nezuko ship. I do not think it works. I actually think it's morally quite dubious, and I don't like it. That's pretty much all I have to say.
Hell, you could even do something as simple as giving him a scenario where he wants to fight, but can't overcome his fear and can't fall asleep, forcing him to deal with one of those limitations.
That would be great.
But nothing like that ever happens. Neither of these things hold him back. Zenitsu is also supposedly a total fuck up.
The thing about Zenitsu, I think the only, really likable part of his character is his banter with Tanjiro and Inosuke, which, is always peak for me. It's one of the main reasons why I like the show a lot, but, other than that, there really isn't anything good about him, and there's just so much about his character that I do not like.
Each of the different breathing techniques have a number of specific techniques, for some reason. Zenitsu is a user of
that was
mouth
never
breathing,
elaborated on, but
thunder
it's
breathing,
whatever.
which has 6 forms. But Zenitsu is only capable of using the first of those 6 forms, which you would think would be a big deal, but no. Not only does it not hold him back at all, he also never overcomes this limitation. So this is really character writing 101. When you write a character with a flaw or limitation, that flaw or limitation should cause problems for that character.
Yes, I made this point
If
earlier.
it doesn't,
He's right.
then it isn't really a flaw or a limitation. It's just wasted writing.
I can agree with
Gotouge
that.
wants to have it both ways. He wants to have a funny coward character, and he also wants a character that can pull off cool feats. However, because of the way Zenitsu is written,
You could
he
do
fails
that while doing
remarkably
it well,
in both areas.
Yep.
He's obnoxious as a comic relief character, and his feats lack weight because of the
Most of the
lazy way
time.
he's written.
And most of the time,
But
again.
okay, Mac, I hear you typing in the comments. Zenitsu is an easy target. You cherry-pick
Yes,
this
he
example
is.
to back up your point. Sure, that's a fair statement. I think a lot of people
Yeah, it is
who
a fair
actually like
statement,
Demons
because there are much, much better characters, in my opinion, compared to Zenitsu. Like Inosuke, he's pretty good. I love Inosuke. I love Shinobu. Giyu is also pretty compelling in my opinion.
Slayer can admit that Zenitsu is pretty shit. So why don't we take a crack at a fan
Yeah, that's
favorite?
true.
In fact, Rengoku is so loved by the community that when I asked ChatGPT to tell me why he sucks as a character, the AI refused to do it out of fear of being canceled.
Based.
Luckily, I have no such fear, so I can say in plain terms that Rengoku is a terribly written character.
That's a weird statement, because later in the video, he actually claims Rengoku is just mediocre. So to claim he's terribly written, I mean, maybe he means 2 different things by that, but it's a bit unclear to me.
Alongside the rest of the Hashira. He's immediately introduced by talking about how Nezuko is a demon and should therefore be killed without being given a proper chance.
Well, that is because, like every other demon the Demon Slayer Corps is familiar with, unequivocally wants to attack humans. So he does not have precedent for, like, a peaceful demon. So there is, like, context behind why he suggests that.
That Tanjiro should also be killed for protecting her.
Yeah, that's stupid. That's messed up.
After that, we don't see Rengoku again
That
until
was always a part of his character that really confused me, given, like, his other characterization.
Tanjiro and his gang get sent to a demon-slaying job on a train, where Rengoku immediately makes a complete 180 by being very friendly towards Tanjiro and his friends. Now, credit where credit is due. One of Rengoku's characteristics is that he's a very direct character. He doesn't hold back when he's talking. So you could chalk this up to that aspect of his character. But we're also going to see that he's an extremely kind and caring person. Wanting to kill Tanjiro without giving him a chance to explain himself kind of goes against that.
Yes, it does. I always thought that was dumb. Him wanting to kill Nezuko makes more sense given there's no precedent for a friendly demon, but yeah, him wanting to kill Tanjiro was inconsistent characterization. Don't like it.
Listen, Tanjiro, I think you're a great guy and I'm sure you have your reasons. But as you can clearly see in the Demon Slayer handbook, you broke the dress code policy, so I'm gonna have to kill you and your entire family.
Yep.
Now, in terms of Rengoku's character writing, he's really not that bad.
But you said he had terrible writing. Like, you said he was a terribly written character, so, I mean, that doesn't gel. You just made two inconsistent statements.
He's not good either. He's an incredibly boring character.
But you said he sucked.
He's a generic good boy, a lot like Tanjiro in many ways, but I don't actively hate him like Zenitsu. The real problem with Rengoku is how he is utilized in this story. Rengoku's primary involvement takes place during the Mugen train arc, where the crew has to fight a demon that has melded with a train, and Jesus! Look at that! Demon Slayer really does have peak animation quality.
I would say that's like some of the weaker CGI in the entire show. There is much, much better CGI. Like, considerably better CGI. This is... It's not horrible, but it's not great. It's kind of a cherry-picked example, but he is just making a gag out of it, so I don't really care.
Throughout the arc, Rengoku puts a lot of faith in Tanjiro and his boys, while Rengoku focuses on protecting the humans riding the train. That is, until they defeat the demon and the train derails, spilling gallons of toxic chemicals. None of this would have happened if the demon had prioritized rail safety over its bottom line.
True.
Tanjiro inhaled some of the vinyl chloride, so he's out of commission, when suddenly... the third upper-ranked demon appears. This is the first time an upper-ranked demon appears in the story, so of course he has to make an impression.
Why is he playing Stroheim's
Rengoku's on his own to fight the demon, at least at first, and he puts up a pretty good fight. The demon clearly has the upper hand, but Rengoku knows he can't back down or Tanjiro and the other humans will die. So he fights on, for as long as he can.
This fight is so peak.
But the strength of one human only amounts to so much. I'm sorry. I meant the strength of one human only amounts to so much when they aren't the main character. As Rengoku bleeds out of his donut hole, he thinks back to his childhood. He remembers a lesson his mother taught him about how people who are born strong have a duty to protect those that are weaker than them. With his remaining strength, he tries to kill the demon, but it isn't enough. The demon escapes as the sun rises because it sure would be inconvenient if the demon could still fight after killing Rengoku.
That is why Rengoku intentionally dragged the fight on as long as he possibly could. Like, this isn't a problem. In fact, it makes sense given his...
Before kicking the bucket for good, Rengoku offers some advice to Tanjiro and his friends. He tells them not to give up and to keep fighting. He tells them that he believes in their strength, and he knows they'll be able to become Hashira themselves someday. Finally, he sees a vision of his late mother and asks her if he was able to use his strength well. She tells him he did, giving him a feeling of relief as he breathes his last breath. Here's why Rengoku's death doesn't work.
Okay.
We did not know Rengoku long enough for his death to be meaningful. What Gotouge is trying to do here is to introduce a character right before they get killed and then try to convince us that their death is meaningful because he wants Tanjiro and his friends to find motivation in the death of someone they cared about without having to kill off an established character. I mean, Gotouge isn't going to kill off Zenitsu, God forbid. Where would the series be without Zenitsu?
I mean,
so instead,
I don't
we
think
get
he should have
Rengoku,
died, but he should have had better character development.
Because Rengoku was written to be missed.
And also,
what do I mean by that?
Sexually harassed anyone.
I called Rengoku a generic good boy earlier, and that's what I'm talking about. We as the audience are supposed to see Rengoku and say, oh my goodness, he's such a sweet boy. He cares so much about people, and he believes in Tanjiro. That way, when he gets fisted, we're supposed to react with, no, not Rengoku.
I'm sorry, the word he
He's
used.
such a sweet boy. He cares so much about people and he believes in Tanjiro. He's written so that we as the audience are sad about his death. But this is a terrible approach. Rengoku, like Tanjiro, is a flawless character, which means he's boring for the same reasons.
That is a fair statement to make.
Walter White, Guts. What do all these characters have in common? They are incredibly flawed characters that the audience loves despite their imperfection.
Because
flawed
love
characters
Walter White.
are relatable.
I mean, I think he's a great
as
character.
the audience, can relate to Kratos' self-hatred,
I don't love him.
or Walt's selfishness, or Guts' rage. And even though they sometimes do terrible things, you root for them because you want to believe that they can overcome their flaws. Because
Something
that
like
means
that,
you
Joe.
can overcome your flaws. Flawless characters are not relatable because people are not flawless.
Of course not.
If the audience can't relate to a character, then how on earth are we meant to be sad about their death? I said before that Rengoku's death doesn't work because we didn't know him long enough, but that's not really the problem.
Yeah, it's not.
After all, I praised the writing of Himeno in Chainsaw Man, and she died in even fewer chapters than Rengoku.
Yeah, that was great.
The problem is
I
that
like
Rengoku is written as an incomplete
I've seen it too, and yeah, Chainsaw Man has pretty strong character writing.
character. He has no flaws, he has no relationship with the other characters, and we did not learn what he lived for, what his motivations were. And no, I don't count his desire to protect people as a motivation because his mommy told him to is a super weak reason for that desire since that relationship wasn't fleshed out.
I'm assuming it's also because he was raised, in an organization where that was like super emphasized, but
It is possible to have Rengoku exist.
fair enough. That
and have
wasn't
his death
delved
be
into very
meaningful.
much.
One easy way would be to make Rengoku an asshole.
I disagree
When Rengoku
with this.
was first introduced, he had no faith in Nezuko and wanted to kill Tanjiro. Let's keep that. Then, when they
I would
meet on the
rather
train and the
remove
demon
that,
attacks,
actually.
have Rengoku try to kill Nezuko because he's convinced she'll attack the civilians.
That would be completely ridiculous. I don't understand where he's getting this from. That would never make sense. Like, you would have to, at the very least, change the whole Hashira meeting arc, like, fundamentally, because everyone saw that Nezuko did not attack Sanemi, and Sanemi has the special Morechi blood, so he's super susceptible to demon attacks. Like, he is super attractive to them in terms of, like, what humans they want to eat. They all saw Nezuko outright refusing to attack Sanemi. So, you have to get rid of that. Or else Rengoku making this hypothetical decision in Mack's alternate version would never make any sense. Because if he saw Nezuko refuse to hurt Sanemi fucking Shinazugawa, he's not going to assume that he's gonna, that she's gonna hurt civilians on the train. That's not happening.
Make him a hindrance on Tanjiro and his team because Rengoku's priorities aren't straight. Then, gradually, have him realize that Nezuko is trying to help, and have him begrudgingly put his faith in her.
It would totally be possible to have him, remain likable and kind while, being distrustful of Nezuko and distrustful of Tanjiro. Because, I don't think that he should be, like, outright trying to kill Nezuko in this arc. I think that's way out of line. I don't know why he suggested that. That's way out of line because, it wouldn't make sense after, like, the whole Sanemi thing. So if you're keeping that, it makes more sense to have Rengoku just kind of, like, voice his concerns a little bit, since he still doesn't fully trust Nezuko, but he's still kind to Tanjiro. I think that's maybe a good way of doing it, because one of the major things he says, like, right as he's about to die, is that he accepts Nezuko as a demon slayer. So to have him more, like, ardently oppose that in the arc earlier would be a good way of handling this, I think. So I think the two of us can kind of meet halfway in the middle here. I don't think his version of the character would be super effective. I think maybe, like a combined version of canon Rengoku and Mack's version of Rengoku might be the best possible Rengoku.
After the train derails, let's have Upper Rank 3 appear and try to abduct or kill Nezuko while she's incapacitated, and let Rengoku die protecting her because he realized she's on humanity's side. Then
That isn't a bad idea. That's actually pretty solid.
we can have his last words have a lot of weight. Rengoku can admit to
that
Tanjiro
would
that his
actually
way
make
of
his
thinking
last
was
words,
archaic
a
and
lot
wrong.
more weightier.
Have Rengoku realize that he and his old ways can't defeat Muzan, and tell Tanjiro that it's him and his new ways that will finally end this fight.
That's a good
Rengoku
idea.
tells Tanjiro he believes in him and kicks the bucket.
Yep, that's a
This scenario
good-
serves
yeah.
3 purposes that would improve this story. First, it makes Rengoku a relatable character while maintaining his likability because he
I don't think it would do that very well if he outright tries to kill Nezuko.
comes around at the end.
If he just voices his like distrust in like a very kind and respectful way, then I think that would maintain his likability. Him outright trying to kill Nezuko after clearly demonstrated that she will not hurt humans. Well, I just, I don't think that works.
Second, it displays character growth that is sorely lacking in this series.
That is true.
And third, it gives a reason for why Tanjiro is capable of breaking the stalemate between humans and demons.
Yep.
It
That's a good
establishes
point
that
as well.
Tanjiro and his new way of thinking will change the Demon Slayer core.
Yeah, that
and give
absolutely
them
could
the
have been
ability
delved
to win.
into. I think that's a great point.
Is it a bit generic? Yeah, absolutely. But it's better than the
Generic's
feeling
not
of
bad
indifference I get from Rengoku's actual death.
Yep, fair
At
enough.
least in my scenario, we can imagine the potential
By the
for
way, this is all coming from someone who was fucking obliterated by Rengoku's death, who really felt sad for him. I do think that these, for the most part, this would be an improvement. I have a problem with the whole him trying to kill Nezuko thing, but besides that, I like this version.
change that Rengoku has. And in that knowledge, we can miss who he could have become. That makes
That's
his
totally
death
cool,
mean
yeah.
something.
Yeah, I agree.
Rengoku is not a bad character. He's just
Again,
incredibly
you said he was terribly written, so this confuses me. Maybe he just wanted to make like an enunciated point. Maybe it was satire I was missing, but whatever.
sterile and boring. As a result, I can't feel bad about his death, which means his death does very little for the story.
That is fair.
All right,
I mean,
one more
it's fair
example.
from his perspective. I think a lot of people would disagree with that, but, it's his opinion.
Let's talk about Genya, because boy, oh boy, do I have some things to say about this lad.
Oh, God.
Genya is possibly, if not the single greatest missed opportunity in this entire series. Genya is a character that is introduced very early in the series, all the way back during Tanjiro's test to become a Demon Slayer. Back then, he was immediately introduced as a total piece of shit. He was impatient and wanted his sword right after passing the test. He hit the girl running the test, and he had the gall to express a negative opinion about a popular anime on
Truly
the
horrible.
internet.
I can't believe he
I
said
don't
that.
really
That's
like
canon, by the
Demon
way.
Slayer.
I've had a good chuckle over that one. I'm coming after you.
After that, he disappeared for a long time, only to show back up during the Swordsmith Village arc. Genya was again shown to be a total asshole by being very rude to Tanjiro.
Remember, this guy said, Mac said earlier in the video that Tanjiro does not conflict with anyone, which is very funny considering he's now bringing this up, but what minor.
But we learn a lot more about him in this arc, such that he is brothers with this stupid Scar guy from the Hashira. They aren't on very good terms either. Genya just wants
That's
his
true.
Oni-chan to notice him, but Scarman wants Genya to fuck off. There's
Yep.
also one huge thing about Genya that is the ultimate example of
Tsunemi is a huge fucking asshole.
the complete
I have very conflicted feelings with how, his character was handled in the end.
lack of focus in this
But
series.
that's a whole different story.
Genya cannot use breathing techniques for some reason. That will never be explained.
Yeah, that's not explained very well.
See, this is a predictable problem. I mentioned earlier that if you're going to have a power system like breathing techniques that every character uses, there needs to be a better explanation for how it
Not
works than
every.
what we're given.
But
It
most.
is literally just breathing a certain way. Yet for some unexplained reason, Genya is incapable of breathing, apparently. The only reason we're given for why breathing could possibly be inaccessible to some humans is that it's apparently very taxing on the body. So all you need to do in order to explain why Genya can't use breathing is to tell me he has respiratory problems or something.
True.
He's got a medical exemption and he can't wear a mask to the grocery store. That's enough for me at this point.
Yep.
But we don't even get that. In fact, it's even worse than that. You might be wondering how someone like Genya is capable of surviving as a Demon Slayer given that breathing techniques are how Demon Slayers level the playing field in the face of a demon's strength. Well, Genya has a unique ability. He can eat the flesh of a demon in order to temporarily gain access to their powers.
Yeah, this
including
is
their regenerative
so
abilities.
I
So
never
that raises
got
the
this.
question. How is that possible?
It was
Well, Genya has special digestive organs. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you think that was a transition into a more detailed explanation?
yeah.
Well, I did too. But no, that's it. His tummy is special, and that means he can become a demon for a bit.
Yeah, this is not
It's also
explained.
established that he is literally the only person that can do this. Genya's
don't know if that
inclusion
was
in this story
established.
is a
I'd have to
huge
double-check
mistake
that.
on Gotoge's part, because Genya's existence
the only
rather
one that
ironically
we are shown
deconstructs
to
Tanjiro
be doing that.
as a protagonist. I mentioned earlier that one of the things I find frustrating about this series is that Tanjiro's very existence manages to break a century-old stalemate between the demons and the humans. As soon as Tanjiro
Yeah, I
becomes a
remember
part of
that,
the Demon
and it's
Slayer
fair.
Corps, things suddenly start moving in the direction of defeating Muzan. The one and only defense that I can think of for this aspect of Demon Slayer's writing is that Tanjiro is special. He has the mark on his face that increases his
Yes.
physical abilities, as well as the ability to use sun breathing, which is inexplicably stronger than the other breathing techniques. These abilities
Yes.
are what set Tanjiro apart from the other Demon Slayers. And it's that edge that arguably allows him to break the stalemate. So
Yep.
what the fuck? Genya is special too! The
Yeah, this is
motherfucker
a
can
very
literally
fair
use the
point.
power of demons against them, yet he's been unable to achieve the same feats as Tanjiro?
Well, that's
Hell, Genya's abilities are theoretically better than Tanjiro's. It's established upon their introduction that breathing techniques are used to grant the Demon Slayer demon-like physical abilities. Well, Genya's demonification does the same thing on top of giving him demon-like regenerative abilities. Genya is capable of fighting demons on a more level playing field than any other character in this story. Yet you'd be shocked to find out that he does not do anything notable to break the stalemate the way Tanjiro does.
that's not necessarily
Genya
true.
having special abilities does not automatically allow him to be stronger than the other demon slayers. So his existence in this story puts a massive spotlight on the flaw of writing that is Tanjiro as a protagonist.
Okay, a couple things to note here. Genya has to bite the demons to take their powers. He specifically has to bite the demons, which is often very difficult considering how fast they are and how quick they are to react to like certain attacks. Like, the problem is that he doesn't often get the chance to bite demons in the first place. And I mean, we haven't seen him go up against any powerful demons before in the story. I mean, presumably, maybe he did go after some smaller demons. It's not really important, but maybe he did. So I'm sure he used this ability, but again, it's hard to find the upper rank demons, and it's hard to get to them if he does find them. Now, he does play significant roles in all the fights we're shown him in. Like, for example, against Han Tengu, he puts in a lot of the effort. He's actually crucial to the Han Tengu fight. His ability comes massively, advantageous in that fight. He's super important. And as well, in the Kokushibo fight, Genya, Kokushibo could not have gone down without Genya. In fact, Genya might have had the most important blow against Kokushibo by entrapping him in that tree. So I would say to devalue Genya as if his abilities don't factor into the plot at all, just seem, just doesn't seem like a valid point to me. I do understand, however, the dissatisfaction with, Genya's powers not being more explored, not being better explained. That's all fair.
And lastly, to add insult to injury, after Tanjiro and Genya fight together, Genya suddenly stops being the massive asshole that he was shown to be. He's just a nice guy all of a sudden. That is not character development.
I don't actually remember. So I haven't seen Swordsmith Village in a while. I don't remember if there was anything that really prompted him to have this development. I will just take Captain Mack's word for it.
Never given a reason to change, nor did he go through the process of changing. Genya is by
That's
far
true.
the worst written character in Demon Slayer, and yet, unbelievably,
Really?
Genya is the rule, not the exception.
It depends, again.
Caricature is an art form in which the artist takes the notable features of their subject and exaggerates them to a comical degree. And that's why I called this caricature writing earlier. These characters have one or two characteristics that are exaggerated and thrown in your face constantly. Despite what you may think, I don't expect every character to have an ocean's level of depth. But these motherfuckers don't even have puddles. These characters are the basin in a desert that used to be an ocean millions of years ago, but now you just find nothing but dust to choke on. What you see is what you get. They are surface level, they are boring and obnoxious. It wouldn't be so bad if Gotouge wasn't trying desperately to convince you that these characters are deeper than they appear. He does this by making sure that legitimately every fucking character gets a backstory. The good guys get backstories, the bad guys get backstories, the barely relevant characters get backstories. It's a goddamn backstory battle royale where they're all competing to be the least relevant. Now I know
Least
this
relevant Tengen? Are you sure? Is that really the clip you want to be
is
playing?
rich coming from me because
I'm not familiar with One Piece outside of the live action, which I did quite enjoy. I'm assuming they have a lot of flashbacks.
having a lot of backstories is not in and of itself a problem. The issue is that none of the backstories are used in a meaningful way.
I have some questions. I do not think that's true, but okay.
You can do a lot with a backstory. You can use it to explain why a character is the way that they are, or to
which I would say they do multiple times, but I won't cut them off too early.
explain events that led to the situation the characters are in.
That is also done. Like you can't argue that Gyutaro and Daki don't at least have that. Akaza has that. To an extent, Kokushibo has that. Doma has that. A lot of the villains actually have like pretty interesting backstories, in my opinion. Rui as well. I mean, there's a plethora you're just kind of ignoring. Like, Akaza's whole philosophy of, like, might makes right, the strong before the weak. Like, you need to kind of prove yourself, and you need to, you know, go down strong, not wither away like humans do. Like, that's all directly informed by his backstory, which I thought was implemented incredibly well. Even Muzan has an interesting backstory to an extent that kind of informs his current character. And he's often slept on by, like, even most of the fandom, so I don't really know where this whole thing about the backstories having no meaning is coming from. I could go into this maybe another time if I, like, really had the receipts to back it up. I'm not planning on this being, like, a huge response. I just like offering my thoughts on this situation. So, yeah.
Or simply as a world-building tool.
Yeah, they don't use flashbacks as world-building tools very often in Demon Slayer, so that's a fair thing to say.
Gotouge mostly uses them to throw exposition about characters at you, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
That is true, to
The
be
problem
fair.
is a matter of relevance to the story and characters.
But it is relevant to the characters, like Akaza, Kokushibo, Doma, Gyutaro and Daki. You have Hashira too, you have Tengen. A lot of the reason why Tengen is so harsh is, you know, because of the way he was raised, like with, you know, the harsh shinobi rules and like all of his siblings basically fucking fighting each other to the death. I mean, even that actually is some interesting world building. Like the shinobi culture in Demon Slayer is unfortunately not really elaborated on, even though it kind of is in the flashback. It could use some more work, but yeah. I mean, Tengen has an interesting backstory. Shinobu has an interesting backstory that informs how she is. Giyu has an interesting backstory that informs how she is. Sanemi has one. Even Gyome has one. In fact, Gyome has one of the most unique ones, in my opinion, that I really like. And they do inform the characters.
This is used for every single demon that Tanjiro defeats. Before they die, each of
Not everyone, but most of the important ones.
them has to
Poor Gyoko got no backstory.
recount their sob story of how they were abused as humans and what led to them being demons in the first place.
You just said that the backstories don't inform their characters. But again, you're saying that they provide direct context as to how they became the way they are.
Now, I've actually seen a lot of people praise this aspect of the writing, but I don't really understand why. A theme
I'd say
throughout
it's
Demon
worthy of
Slayer is
praise
that every
sometimes.
demon was once
Depends
human,
on the
and that
backstory.
at heart, they might not necessarily be evil. For example, during the backstory of the first upper-ranked demon that Tanjiro and his friends defeated, you learn that they mostly did what they did to protect each other.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But what does knowing that change for us as the audience? How does that knowledge recontextualize their actions? Again, I understand the desire to humanize the demons, but the problem is that nothing is done with that concept. Let's talk about world building, which is something that Demon Slayer is sorely lacking in.
I will say this specific criticism about, like, Gyutaro and Daki's backstory is fair. Even though I still think that one's pretty effective.
There is nothing done to establish the state of the world at large outside of the limited sphere of the Demon Slayer core and their battle
This
against
is
the
true.
demons.
I don't disagree with this
I
at
say
all.
limited because the existence of the demons and therefore the Demon Slayer core is not even general knowledge. Demons are few enough in number that they're seen as urban legend. So that begs the question, what is going on outside this limited sphere? If we're in the Taisho era, then how is World War I affecting the Demon Slayer's ability to operate?
Would that really have an impact? Like, the Demon Slayers are like a secretive shadow organization, whereas like the general civilian population are the ones who are going to be in by like World War I. ignoring the fact that most of the story could very well take place before World War I even started, and that Japan, like, to my knowledge, wasn't, like, super heavily involved in the war. I don't see how that would make significant changes to, I don't think that would really significantly alter the Demon Slayer's ability to operate. I mean, it's not like a matter of weapons running dry, because, in World War I, Japan isn't going to be using fucking swords to fight. They're going to be using guns. And, like, most of that technology is not used against demons, which is actually kind of stupid. It's kind of a weird world-building thing that you could have pointed out here, but yeah, so that's another topic for another day. Again, I just don't think World War I would really matter that much to this story, and I don't think it has to. Like, this kind of reminds me of Mr. Enter's. I know this is an unfair comparison to make. I'm sure Mack is, like, way better of a reviewer than Mr. Enter, but it does remind me of Mr. Enter's, like, why didn't they show the effects of 9/11 in Turning Red kind of criticism? Because I don't think that's necessary for this story. You can world build without it. I do wish they world built some more. They didn't need to throw in World War I. I don't think World War I would have had a substantial effect on the Demon Slayer's ability to operate, since they're largely disconnected from public society in Japan anyway.
What's the state of the common people, and how does it relate to the demon's threat to humankind?
It's largely irrelevant. The Demon Slayer core, like, greatly emphasizes this whole doctrine of not letting the demons come in contact with at all.
These are questions.
Which, I mean, you can criticize as poor world building, but that is an explanation.
Questions that are not and will not ever be answered.
I just explained how one was.
Hell, even a basic explanation of where in Japan all this is taking place is not answered. Nor is there any kind of explanation as to how each location in the story relates to one another. It's like levels in a video game. You're at Demon Slayer HQ, then you're at the Butterfly Mansion, then you're at the Entertainment District without any idea what it took to get there.
Yeah, that's
This is terrible. Demon Slayer wants us to believe that demons are a threat to humans without showing us how large of a threat they are, or if they even impact daily life for the average person.
Yes, this is fair. This is fair. The world building, like, greatly lacking in this aspect.
Now, what does this have to do with backstories? Well, I mentioned earlier that backstories can be used for world building, and there's an excellent missed opportunity to do that here. There is one common theme across every backstory in this world, and that's cruelty. Nearly every demon in this story had humans do straight up awful things to them before they were demons. Many of the demon slayers were also treated cruelly throughout their lives. So let's use that to build our world. Tanjiro grew up in a small, closed society. It would be very easy to write a scenario where Tanjiro is ignorant to the ways of the world outside of his small village. It could be that upon going out into it, Tanjiro realizes the world is not as kind as he would have imagined. This would contrast well with his kindness as a character.
I agree with that, yeah.
It could then be bolstered through learning the backstories of the demons he fights. Tanjiro could start his story with the naive belief that ridding the world of Muzan and his demons will make it a better place, only to slowly realize that humans are just as cruel to one another.
That is absolutely a good idea. I think that would make the story a lot, just a lot better.
That realization could lead to Tanjiro recognizing that Muzan still needs to be defeated, but that the world won't be fixed if that happens. It would give him a motivation to make the world a better place even after Muzan's eventual defeat. As it stands, the question of what the fuck Tanjiro would do with his life after beating Muzan is unanswered, which...
Considering the fact that he has the Demon Slayer mark, which is explicitly stated to be like a death curse for everyone but Yoriichi, probably not much. Like, he's gonna die at 25. He's not got much time. Unless he has, like, Sunbreather immunity, but that's never explained.
Isn't a good thing. Is it a bit cliche to go for the whole humans are the real demons all along thing? Yeah.
Not if there's some nuance to it, because there's much human cruelty in the world, but there's also, like, such, like, a good sense of community between many people. And I think if you explore, like, both aspects and you kind of explore the nuances of it, then you've got a really compelling story. And not just one that goes, like, humans bad in an extremely lazy and cynical way.
A little. But again, it gives meaning to those backstories where currently there is none.
That's totally fair. Even though I still think a lot of the backstories do have their own meaning, but that would enhance them.
As it stands, it's not even like Tanjiro learns the backstories of his friends or enemies. They exist purely for us as the audience. Yet they also ironically don't do anything for us. Right now, they only serve to explain where certain characteristics come from, such as why Zenitsu is such a fuck-up, or why Genya's brother hates him. He doesn't actually. The question becomes how many of those characteristics really need to be explained, and the answer is often that they don't. Now you may be confused, because a lot of my problems with Demon Slayer come from a lack of explanation.
They don't necessarily need to be explained, but yeah, I mean, I do think they help inform the characters anyway.
Here I am saying
So I'm not going to complain about them.
quirks don't need to be explained. The problem is when a
Depends on
lack
what
of
one.
explanation creates holes in your ability to understand the story.
Yes, this is true.
I don't need to know why Snake Man wears a mask, because he is a side character with very little plot relevance.
That's not why Obanai's backstory was shown, just to be clear. His backstory was shown, and I do hate the placement of it. It's very poor, the way that it was basically shoved right into the end. Even though I liked his backstory overall, its placement was not good. The reason why his backstory was actually like shown to us was not to explain why he has a mask. Like that's like a relatively minor detail overall. It's mostly to explain why he has crippling self-hatred and imposter syndrome, and why he feels like he's not good enough, either to, you know, marry Mitsuri or be a true demon slayer. And that actually has payoff in the final battle, where he kind of goes toe-to-toe with Muzan for a bit, albeit heavily weakened Muzan. Extremely weakened Muzan. And there's actual payoff to the emotions brought about by that backstory. Would it have been better if the backstory was placed earlier in the story? Yes, unequivocally, but I don't think it's a good idea or a good point to kind of limit this backstory down to, oh, that's why he has a mask, because it informs more of his character than that.
Spend less time on that and more time fleshing out breathing.
I don't necessarily think you have to cut that backstory out. Just place it somewhere else in the story and add more about breathing, you know, in the story. Problem with Demon Slayer that I feel like kind of informs all of these other, you know, problems is just that it's very short. It feels very rushed. I am aware that I've heard that Gotouge had some health issues at the end, so that obviously provides some context as to why they felt like they might have needed to rush the ending. But in general, the series is pretty rushed, and ironically, doesn't have much time to breathe. So that's, like, that kind of informs that problem and a lot of the other problems.
Telling your audience that this is just who they are is often enough. And while I understand why people enjoy the demons being humanized through the backstory, it's ultimately meaningless if nothing is done with that information. So they don't actually add anything to story, and they don't need to exist.
That is kind of true. Again, I feel like the backstories, again, they inform a lot of what the characters believe. See, one thing that I really disagree with, at least in some cases, he's kind of making it out to seem like none of the backstories really serve the characters, they just serve the audience. A lot of them serve the audience, that is fair. But there are definitely cases where, you know, it does actually serve the characters. Like, I mentioned Akaza's backstory earlier. Like, Akaza has one of my favorite backstories. I personally think it's very compelling, but it also shows you where he got his philosophy, one that directly contradicts Rengoku's philosophy, which is part of what made him so likable anyway, an aspect that is kind of glossed over by this video. His whole philosophy of the human spirit and, like, wanting to live life as a human and accept death with open arms without chasing immortality. Tanjiro then adopts that kind of philosophy, and Gyu adopts that philosophy despite being kind of like an emo at the start, and he has character development based on that as well. A bit fast-paced for my liking, but character development, and that whole aspect of the philosophy, that whole battle between those philosophies, is actually an element that does enhance these characters, and it is helped by the backstory. So there is that example. Now, to be fair, it is one example. I'm sure that Mack could point to various examples that have nothing to do with this. The Gyutaro and Daki example that he seems to be focusing on still is very strange now that I think about it, because it's also meant as a parallel to Tanjiro and Nezuko, and you can debate how well that was executed, but that's also something that kind of tells you about the characters, kind of tells you about, like, the parallels between the characters and informs them greater.
Now, the biggest thing that Demon Slayer has going for it is its action segments.
This is true.
The anime is done by
pretty unequivocally.
Ufotable, who also worked on a lot of the Fate anime. And yeah,
Yep.
they're pretty good at what they do. The action scenes are great to watch. However, I read the manga, and the action scenes in the manga are very poorly executed.
I would disagree with that, at least for the most part, but that is just me.
It's really important for the art in an action manga to convey what is going on from one panel to the next, so the reader can follow what is happening.
I personally followed, like, the entire final battle just fine. Like, I sped through that shit, and, you know, to me, it was pretty fucking fire, but, you know, to each their own.
Some standout examples that do this really well are Sakamoto Days and Jujutsu Kaisen.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised about JJK.
So easy to understand the flow of combat.
I gotta
there
watch
are parts
JJK
of the scene
at
that you
some
can use
point.
to orient your understanding of the scene and recognize the characters' relationship to one another as they clash. This is
Yeah,
not
that's
true
fair.
of Demon Slayer. The action is severely weakened because it often becomes near impossible.
It's not true of Demon Slayer in some cases, in my opinion. But, you know, if Captain Mack thinks it's more universally true, in his opinion, that's totally
to
fine.
follow what's happening. Take a look at this great page, where the onomatopoeia actually blocks the action so you can't see anything.
Yeah, that kind of sucks, but it is just one panel. I didn't have this problem for the most part.
Or this page here.
That also
If you're seeing
sucks.
this page for the first time without any context, please do me a favor and take a guess at what is happening in the comments.
I mean, Muichiro is swinging a sword. That's really all I can see.
Look, art is subjective. In fact,
Yes.
all of this is.
Exactly.
If you're thinking of leaving a comment,
I always respect people who admit this, because no matter what, like, you can claim your standards are objective, but they are not. You're making up the standards, or you're, like, taking them from someone else who made them up. So, inevitably, like, no matter what, whatever, like, objective analysis you're trying to do is generally just, you know, for the most part, it's just going to turn out to be subjective anyway. So, anyone who admits this, I respect them.
at some point informing me that all of this is my opinion, then congratulations, you're right. You stated a fact that does not counter my arguments or disprove my points.
Yep, that would be a useless counter to the video.
While you're done by the comments, you want to hit that like button? But more than anything else, art is extremely subjective. So
Yes.
I don't want to talk about this too long, but I can't stand the art direction of Demon Slayer.
That's totally fair. I respect that.
The action
I found it much more easy to follow. I honestly thought, like, the fights were really cool. But, you know, maybe that's just me.
fails so hard to visualize what an attack is supposed to do that Gotouge feels the need to explain all of them rather than just showing you.
Yeah, this is a pretty big problem.
More often than not, attacks simply lack
Like, I like the art in Demon Slayer. I like the manga fights, but that is a problem. I'm not going to deny that.
weight because there's no clear idea of what effect it's having.
This is not true generally from my experience, but I respect what he's saying.
It's funny because this is not true at all in some cases. Oftentimes, sun-breathing attacks are very
Yeah.
impactful. Other times,
Most
I
of the
can't
time,
even tell
I
if
would
the attacks
agree.
did anything, like with many water-breathing attacks.
Not a great panel. I didn't usually tend to have this experience, but, you know, it's not a great example.
And Jesus, the character designs are awful. What?
I strongly disagree with this, like, in the strongest possible terms. I don't know where he's getting this from. I mean, it is his opinion, but I'm gonna contend with it.
is this? They look like
Peak.
they were ripped off a teenager's DeviantArt page.
Okay, that's fair.
This guy's supposed to be the main villain? I'm supposed to be intimidated by him?
He has multiple different outfits, actually, a lot of different forms, and a lot of the time, intimidation derives more from what characters do in the story compared to how they look. Like, Muzan's a fucking menace. He makes Akaza tremble, even after we watched Akaza completely demolish Rengoku. Like, you know, kill Rengoku in that fight. He makes Akaza tremble, he fucking slaughters the lower moons. He, like, and of course, he just kills people in the middle of, when they minorly inconvenience him, like, in Asakusa, that arc. Like, there's some drunkards who try to harass him, and he just fucking plows them right into the wall, and it's a really cool scene. Don't get me wrong, you can obviously argue this is a lazy way of making your villain intimidating. I think it's pretty effective because you're showing off the villain's abilities, and one thing you can't say about Muzan is that his abilities are not well, like, described or shown, because they're well described and shown, especially in the anime. So I would say he's pretty intimidating. I don't think the design hinders him that much. This is one of his goofier designs. I'm familiar with all the Muzan Jackson jokes. I think he has far, far better ones in the series. So, I mean, this is like maybe half a fair point if I'm being generous. But again, it's just personal perspective.
He looks like he's about to tip his fedora to Milady. He looks like on a Redditor thinks looks cool.
Yeah, again, not his best design. Definitely not my favorite. I have, my preferences for other of his designs.
I look like a jackass. Look at that.
And why do they all look like kids? Like every single character looks like a child.
They don't.
Some of them.
Are you really arguing that Tengen and Gyome look like a child? Look like children? Come on. Just stop. I get, but she's just, really short and petite. Mitsuri, I kinda get. Muichiro actually is a child, he's literally 14. But Gyome and Tengen, just stop, okay? You can't convince me of that.
Tanjiro's only 15.
This is all in good fun. I respect, his takes, but I do not get it.
But this dude, 27? He looks like he just got to high school.
No, he does not. Just stop, dude. Just lay off. You can't be
Even
serious.
the old characters look like children.
I don't even have a good rebuttal. I just do not agree.
Children dressing up like adults.
What? Dude, he's just short. What the fuck? He looks like an old man. Come on.
If your story is gonna be so remarkable.
The only argument I can see for him looking like a child is just him being short, which I do have news. Most elderly people do act a lot shorter when they grow up because of how the spine functions.
Remarkably incompetent, can it at least be pretty?
I would say the manga looks good, for the most part.
The last thing I want to talk about is how Demon Slayer wraps up plot lines, which means we enter the territory of anime-only spoilers.
It's not great, although it depends from plotline to plotline. That's what I'll say
So,
about it.
if you don't have the ending of this mess spoiled, please skip ahead to the following time code to hear my final thoughts. Demon Slayer has an absolutely abysmal method of setting up and resolving things. Gotouge will set something up and then either instantly resolve it or not take the proper steps to make the resolution
common
mean
problem.
something. I mentioned earlier that Zenitsu never gets past the hurdle of only being able to use one form of thunder breathing, but that was only partly true. He does get past it, but I'll let you decide the validity of that resolution. In the final arc of the story, which is a huge battle between all of the remaining demons and all of the demon slayers.
And I fucking loved it. I'll just say it. I understand all the critiques being made, but that battle was so insanely satisfying to me. I had a great time the whole time reading it.
Zenitsu single-handedly battles the new upper rank 6 demon, who also happens to be his old rival.
Yeah, this was stupid because there wasn't much build up to it.
Now you might be a bit confused because I never mentioned Zenitsu having
cool
a rival.
fight though.
Well, neither does the manga. Not really anyway.
Yeah, no.
This character is briefly shown in Zenitsu's backstory. His name is Kaigaku, and he chastises Zenitsu for being such a fuck up. They're both students of the same teacher and both users of thunder breathing. Now, this could have been really good. Kaigaku gets introduced very early in the story, so a final battle between him and Zenitsu could have been really strong. But it falls completely flat because there is no build up to this moment. Kaigaku is not mentioned or shown a single time between.
I would argue this is one of the worst examples. There are much better examples. I know, because I've watched the video before, I know he brings up Tamayo, and that's one of my favorites as well.
Backstory and his final battle. His existence is barely even alluded to. Right before their final battle, Zenitsu gets a letter informing him that Kaigaku became a demon.
Yeah,
this is the motivation Zenitsu needs to finally train and become stronger. Completely off screen.
Yeah, that sucked.
My question is, why couldn't this have been done throughout the story instead of right before it needed to happen? Why couldn't Zenitsu constantly have Kaigaku in the back of his mind? Someone stronger that he looks up to that inspires him to fight. Then, when Kaigaku becomes a demon, it could shatter Zenitsu, leaving him heartbroken that Kaigaku could do such a thing, while also giving him the ultimate motivation to fight. When Zenitsu and Kaigaku fight, it's revealed that Zenitsu has gotten over his fear and no longer needs to sleep in order to fight.
You could also maybe explore Kaigaku's character a bit more, because the reason why he turns into a demon canonically is because of Kokushibo. You do not say no to Kokushibo. Kokushibo rolls off and effectively forces him into it. And so that's kind of why it had to happen. it would have been an opportunity to kind of explore Kaigaku and maybe the parallels between Kaigaku and Zenitsu. Like, he turned to demonhood out of fear of Kokushibo because he didn't have much of a choice, but also out of fear of his own mediocrity. And you could kind of have there be a mirror, with him being possibly the worst case Zenitsu. A very, 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 strong potential for a good character arc and a good conclusion to that plotline. Unfortunately, Gotouge did not do that.
And ultimately, Zenitsu defeats Kaigaku by using a new thunder-breathing form. A seventh form that Zenitsu created.
Visually
so
cool,
he
but
got
an
past his
asshole.
fear and his one move limitation. But both of those things happened with zero buildup, so they have absolutely no weight.
Pretty much.
It's like I talked about earlier with Tanjiro. We're getting character development that skips the actual development process. Not to mention that Zenitsu getting past these limitations means
Still a
nothing
bit iffy on the whole
if he
thing
was
about
never held
Tanjiro,
back
but
by them in
for
the first
Zenitsu,
place.
I agree.
I mean, the idea that Zenitsu can invent a new move, but is incapable of learning the established ones is itself pretty ridiculous.
That is true. Like, there are other characters who do invent new moves, like Giyu. He has his own, water-breathing form, but he obviously knows the other water-breathing forms and frequently uses.
You know what would have worked better? In the beginning, Zenitsu only knows the first move. Then, throughout the story, he slowly masters the other 5 forms, allowing him to grow stronger and overcome his limits. Then, in this final battle, he pulls out his new move.
That would be really cool.
It would be the ultimate indication that Zenitsu has actually grown stronger and become a thunder-breathing master.
And don't have him be weird around women anymore. Just develop his character. I can't stop ranting about this guy. I can't stop ranting about how badly the character was handled. And I am 100% on Captain Mack's side with this. I will stand with him till the end of time on Zenitsu specifically. I don't entirely agree with the points, except maybe on the world building. That's, I kind of agree with him on that in some regards, but this is the one thing I will 100% be ride or die for this video on. Zenitsu fucking sucks in the way he was implemented. I don't like him.
As it stands, we have payoff with no buildup.
Correct.
And this is common for Demon Slayer. This is how many plot points are handled. There are scant few examples of character developments or plot twists that are handled well. One good one is Tamayo.
Okay.
Tamayo is introduced very early in the story as a demon that does not eat people. She resents Muzan and wants to find a way to turn demons back into humans.
Yep.
Because of this goal, Tamayo and Tanjiro's goals are linked because Tanjiro wants to make Nezuko human again.
Yeah,
to
I really
this
like
end,
this.
Tamayo asks Tanjiro to collect the blood.
And the whole part about how Nezuko effectively sees Tamayo as human, because, she's nice and she doesn't give in to her urges to eat people. That's the sweetest, most underrated moments in the whole show, and it kind of sucks that people don't acknowledge that. Tamayo in general is such an underappreciated character. She's got to be one of my favorites.
Blood of one of the 12 Kizuki. This is something that is on his mind and referenced across multiple battles until Tanjiro finally manages to do it after battling upper rank 6. That blood is then used to not only make a demon curing medicine, but also to make a poison to destroy Muzan in the final battle.
Which is one of the coolest things in the entire final battle, I should add. Tamayo was a fucking badass here.
That poison is what weakens Muzan enough for Tanjiro and the others to ultimately defeat him.
Exactly. And that's one of the examples of Tanjiro not kind of just shifting things on his own. There are other people who are crucial in the fights. I do think that kind of glosses over some other examples of this happening, Genya with Kokushibo. He's very crucial there. He kind of overstates Tanjiro's role in the whole Gyutaro Daki fight. But yeah, Tamayo's got to be one of the best examples of this, and I'm glad he's praising it because I will praise it too. It's one of my favorite aspects of the show, and the manga, I should say.
This is all great.
Yeah, it's great.
Tamayo and her goal are introduced early, then referenced frequently throughout the story, then the payoff of that setup is meaningful. This stuff isn't hard, guys. All of it should look like this.
Exactly. I agree.
The ending of this mess is barely worth talking about. From an art direction's perspective, the entire thing is a mess of random attacks. There's no
I would disagree with that, but again, it is subjective.
No flow or choreography whatsoever. Everyone works together to defeat Muzan, a bunch of people die.
Yeah, and it's very cool, seeing, how, fucking hard and grating it is. Yeah, you can offer these criticisms about the whole ending. I totally get it. One I think really shines through with the ending that maybe isn't really touched on as much because, to be fair, it's a video mostly criticizing Demon Slayer, is that it really feels earned when Muzan gets defeated because of how much effort like these Demon Slayers put in. So many people die, and it takes so much combined work to even in his weakened state, in his poisoned state, kill Muzan. I think that's one of the strongest kind of aspects of that battle, and I will glaze it very, very gladly.
In his dying moment, Muzan makes Tanjiro into a demon. They use the medicine to turn him back, and everything is fine. The most offensive part of the ending is the last chapter, where for some dumbass reason, it cuts to modern day and shows how all the characters' descendants turned out. Like, why? Just to confirm some ships? This doesn't do anything. It doesn't.
They didn't need to do that. I'm pretty sure the ships were already confirmed anyway.
Add anything to the existing story. And let's not forget that there would have to be some serious inbreeding happening for all these characters to look so much like their ancestors.
I assume it's symbolic, but I believe there is actually like canonical incest to a minor degree with like the descendants of Zenitsu and Nezuko, as well as Tanjiro and Kanao. But it's not like direct incest.
I mean, Jesus, they even have matching scars.
You know what really sucks? Genya and Tsunemi being resurrected as cops. When the characters you like get resurrected as cops, that's like the worst thing that can happen to you when watching something. Truly offensive.
The ending is stupid. It doesn't leave an impact. It doesn't pay things off in a meaningful way.
I disagree, but that's fine.
And as one last fuck you, it's revealed that Tanjiro's family can inexplicably become demons that are immune to being killed.
That's not unexplained. It's because they have a proximity to the blue spider lily. To be fair, that may not have been addressed directly in the manga, but I'm pretty sure it was. I was able to follow at the very least.
By sunlight.
The blue spider lily is directly explicitly mentioned to be like the final like piece to the puzzle of why, of how demons could resist the sunlight. It's what Muzan is looking for. The story touches upon that. Now, I don't remember if it was ever said that Tanjiro and Nezuko were in proximity to the blue spider lily. I think it was implied, which actually might be better. I think it might have been shown visually at one point. I would have to double check that. But bottom line, this is not unexplained. There is an explanation. It's just, debatably not a very good one. I think Captain Mack would argue it wasn't, but there is an explanation.
Chalk it up to generations of incest or something.
That's canon, actually. Yep.
Chosen one indicator number 4.
No. Again, there is an explanation, but whatever. I'm not going to get too hung up on that.
Ultimately, the main and biggest problem with Demon Slayer comes from a lack of focus.
That's fair.
Demon Slayer wants to overload you with useless information instead of fleshing out the things that matter. It wants to
Again, you can just have minor details show up and not really elaborate on them. It's fine every once in a while. I guess the argument is that maybe it does this too much compared to fleshing out things that matter, which, that I agree with.
Show you every character's backstory, but not do anything with any of them.
That, again, is, I don't think that's true. I think there are a fair few backstories where it does absolutely inform the character and serve a purpose, but whatever, I'm not getting too into it.
It wants you to be sad about Rengoku's death, but refuses to take the time to make you care about him.
Fair enough from his perspective.
It wants you to believe demons are not inherently evil, but doesn't want to do anything with that premise.
Tamayo, you just praised Tamayo, but whatever.
It wants you to believe Tanjiro can shift the tides of war, but shows you again you can't do the same.
He does. He shifts the tides of 2 very important battles, as I said before. He shifts the tides of the Hontengu battle significantly. He arguably the GOAT of the Kokushibo fight as well. And both of those characters, both of those demons not dying would have led to a loss of the Demon Slayers. Like a small thing being different in the Infinity Castle arc would have led to a ripple effect that led to Muzan's victory, which is another important thing that I really want to praise about the ending, regardless of all you can say that's, negative about it. I think it's very clear that without everyone working in tandem the exact way they did, if one thing had gone wrong, it all would have spiraled out of control. So it really emphasizes the whole teamwork, mutual kind of assistance aspect of it. And I really like that. But yeah, I mean, acting like Genya was never shown to be useful is just kind of not a good take in my opinion, because, again, Hantengu, Kokushibo, incredibly useful to both those fights.
It wants you to believe sun breathing is the strongest form of breathing, but doesn't give a valid explanation for why.
I guess it does give an explanation, but it's not very fleshed out, and I understand why he doesn't accept it.
A lot of the answers to the questions I posed throughout this video can be answered by saying because Gotouge said so.
Yeah, fair
Sun
enough.
breathing is strong because Gotouge said so. Genya isn't special because Gotouge said so.
That is fair.
Rengoku's death is sad because Gotouge said so.
That is fair, but it is also a bit of a more subjective one where, like, people can kind of derive, like, their own emotional value and, like, their own interpretations of his arc. But yeah, I mean, Gotouge obviously did want to tug on our heartstrings.
Gotouge does not take the time to flesh out any of these ideas because of a severe lack of focus.
Not necessarily. They do flesh out some ideas, but for the most part, I understand what he's saying.
He just wants you to trust him and not ask questions.
Yeah, that is a fair take.
I read
in a lot of respects
that Demon Slayer came to be when one of Gotouge's editors suggested that he writes a story with an easy to understand theme.
Well, they did.
And it seems to me that he took that to mean write a story that is so brain dead, even a 4-year-old can understand it.
This seems a bit harsh, but, like, given his perspective, yeah, I understand.
You can write a meaningful and deep story that has an easy to understand theme. The message of every single one of my favorite series can be summed up in a single sentence, but unlike Demon Slayer, they still manage to be competent pieces of writing that are deep and meaningful. Throughout the course of writing this video, I came to realize that many of the things I criticize about Demon Slayer are not things that I feel the need to criticize in other manga.
I respect him for admitting this, because a lot of times people have double standards when it comes to media they like. Like, I've been writing a, like, kind of a retrospective on Song, the old show I was really into by David R.B. before, this is a whole other thing. The old Minecraft animated series that was, once run by formerly BPS, now Squared Media. I used to be really into that, and then I noticed a bunch of flaws, and now I'm kind of pointing them out in writing. But a lot of those flaws could also apply to Demon Slayer, which I've realized after watching this video. So having the humility to admit to having double standards when it's media you don't like versus media you like is very respectable.
That's because I do not expect the things I read to be perfect.
Neither do I, and no one should.
Series has flaws, and it isn't fair to expect them not to.
Exactly.
But with other series that I am not so critical of, they all have things that make them incredible that allow me to give them a break where they aren't perfect. I can forgive...
That's fair. For me, in Demon Slayer, that would be, well, for one, the animation and the character interactions and some of the character writing, some of the plot points. Again, a lot of them are scuffed, a lot of them are messed up, but enough of them work for me to forgive the show.
Lacking world building if the character writing is strong. I can forgive mediocre character writing if the action is engaging. And I can forgive boring
I definitely thought the action was engaging, so...
if the world building is incredible. The problem with Demon Slayer is that it doesn't do anything particularly well. And
Yep, that is 100% like fair and respectable from his position.
It does many things very poorly.
That is also
I can't accept Demon Slayer's flaws because there is simply no silver lining to point to.
That's the big difference. See, I acknowledge that. That's the big difference between us. I acknowledge that Demon Slayer has many flaws. However, I do believe there is some silver in the show and in the manga, which is why I still enjoy it. So I think that's the main difference.
At least in the case of the manga. I think I understand why a lot of people watch Demon Slayer. They watch Demon Slayer for the same reason that I watch Kitchen Nightmares. I watch Kitchen Nightmares a lot while I'm editing or gaming, but I know it's not a very good show. It's trashy reality TV, the editing is atrocious, the format is predictable. But I still enjoy watching it because funny, angry British man.
This is true.
I like to imagine that most people enjoy Demon Slayer for a similar reason. I want to believe that they know the writing is atrocious, world building non-existent, and generally lacks focus. But
I know this to an extent because I don't entirely agree. I don't agree with all of his criticisms, but I agree with some of them. So, like, I acknowledge that there are many flaws in the writing while still enjoying the show. I don't want to be told that I have to accept that the show is utter garbage while still liking it, because I think that's silly. I'm not saying that's what he's saying, but some may say that, so I just want to make that clear. Like, I accept it's flawed. I don't necessarily think it's terrible, or as bad as Mack is saying, but whatever. Point's been made.
They enjoy watching it nonetheless because they find the animated fights enjoyable. It's something to
And yeah, this fight is fucking awesome again.
just turn your brain off and watch.
That's fair. I would say I'm more critical the more I think of Demon Slayer. Like, back in 2023, like mid-2023, I was really into it. I didn't really think much about it, so I just thought it was great. Now I understand that it's kind of flawed the more I think about it, but it's still going to hold a special place in my heart for a variety of reasons.
What I want to believe, at least. But then I see all these video essays calling Demon Slayer peak fiction or saying it's redefining the shonen genre.
This is always a tough one because so many video essays come out and say that about things, and then whenever you go into them, you tend to get your expectations kind of dashed, which is like excessive hype trains are maybe not the best idea unless the media really, really deserve it.
Or I watch it consistently top manga sales charts. Or a movie releases and becomes the highest grossing anime movie ever made.
You have to admit, though, there is much appeal in the Mugen Train movie. I mean, you do admit this because the animation is fire, and like on a level, the characters are pretty enjoyable. Even if you don't think there's much depth to it, you can at least, like, presumably understand why it's so popular. And the manga, too, is very popular. Even before the anime came out, it was reasonably popular, and I think it's for many of the same reasons that I've said that I like it. And I mean, I totally respect that those are pretty much invalid to Mack, who has a different perspective, but I hope he can acknowledge that, like, you know, some people just won't just agree with that. That might be why there's so many sales and shit.
Really have to question that assertion. Are our standards this low that this derivative garbage can become a generation-defining piece of media?
See, okay, this is the part where I start to kind of dislike what he's going for, because he's kind of saying that, like, your standards have to be low for you to enjoy this, which makes it feel like he's kind of invalidating the other perspective. I don't know if he wanted to come across that way, but it just comes off as a little harsh and not really fair to me.
You cannot expect the things you read or watch to be perfect. You cannot expect them to have no flaws. But
True.
for God's sake, people, have higher standards than this.
Again, this just comes off as a bit condescending. I'm sorry. Like, I can't view it any other way. I don't know what he was going for. It just feels very condescending towards people who disagree with him about this.
Ultimately, I know that this video won't change anyone's mind.
I would argue that it actually has changed my mind quite a lot. Like, I'm noticing a lot more flaws now that you've pointed them out. I respect that a lot. You've gotten me to think a lot more about a show that I genuinely like while acknowledging its flaws. So, thank you for that. I'm sure you've shifted tons of minds as well, just in general, because this video has over 1 million views. So, I wouldn't downplay yourself like that. Like, I'm sure that tons of people had their perspectives kind of shifted by this.
The people that agree with me will praise the accuracy of my arguments, while the people that don't will find any number of straw man arguments for why I'm unfit to criticize it at all.
You are not unfit to criticize it. Don't let those people get to you. I 100% respect you, even if I have some problems with how you went about it or some of your arguments. I didn't come off as straw manning you in any way. Like, I would absolutely be welcome to a response where some of his points are further clarified, because, you know, some of them I'm iffy on, some of them I outright disagree with, but in general, I thought that it was, you know, a respectable enough video. I thought he raised some pretty good points, and I'm glad he made it, and, you know, he absolutely has every right to criticize this very popular show. He's adding his opinion to the discourse, and that's always amazing.
But here's the thing. At least when I watch something like Nisekoi, I can find enjoyment in laughing at how absurd it is.
That's
at least when I
fair.
read
I don't
One
know what
Piece,
that is, but
I can feel
it's
inspired
funny.
and uplifted despite its flaws. But with Demon Slayer,
I really got to get into One Piece too. Like, I love the live action, and I'm assuming, like, there's just a lot of fun to be had in the whole series. So I'm really looking forward to starting that.
Despite the hyperbolic delivery of my criticisms throughout this video, I end up feeling nothing.
That is totally fair. Like, I respect that.
I'm left feeling indifferent.
Kind of real, to be honest.
And to me, inspiring indifference is even worse than inspiring hatred.
Yeah, pretty
Because
much.
at least when I hate something, I am feeling something.
Oh yeah.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate that. If you would do me the
Yeah, you're welcome.
honor of
It was an honor to watch.
pressing the like button if you like the video, or leaving a comment letting me know what you think.
Generally good video. I disagreed with some points. I thought you were glossing over some details. You got some things wrong. You could have changed your phrasing a little bit in regards to some points. I'm iffy on some other parts. At times you came off as a little condescending, but generally you came off as respectful, and you made tons and tons of good points. You offered a lot of critiques and a lot of alternatives that would have benefited the show. I disagreed with the Rengoku one a little bit, but the rest I thought was very constructive. This video clearly came from a place of wanting the story to be better, and I respect that. Thank you very much for putting this out there, and I hope my response has been, enjoyable if you ever, watch this, Captain Mack. I sincerely hope so. I hope I haven't, misconstrued any of your points, and again, I'd love some clarification. Going back and forth on this would be amazing. So, thank you very much, and I think I might as well end the recording here since this is the end of the video. Now everyone else who's watching, thanks for watching this far. Thanks for watching my silly little ramblings and me passively agreeing with a video for most of its runtime. So, with that being said, have a nice day, everyone, and goodbye.